Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. Today is Monday, June 10th, 2019. We are in committee meeting this evening. It is on or around 7:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will begin this evening with the Transportation Committee, which is chaired by Councilmember Pete Katsas. Thank you.
President Pro Tem Butler, thank you. This evening, Transportation Committee, we have two bullet points. One of them is actually a presentation, so we're gonna start with that one first. And I would like to introduce Jessie Schmitzer, who is our Athens County Mobility Manager and works for HAPCAP. And she's coming tonight. Actually, the mayor spoke about this last week, about the countywide transportation sales tax.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, Council. Mayor Jackson, thank you for having me tonight. And thank you for your continued support of the Mobility Management Program. I know every year the City of Athens provides a certain amount of matching funds to the program. So thank you for that. I hope I'm doing the program justice. So tonight I just want to give you a short presentation and then have some time for questions or concerns about a potential transportation sales tax levy that would be countywide. A couple weeks ago I started the conversation with the commissioners. And so right now we're at the point where I'm holding 16 meetings across the county. So as you can see, there's kind of a list there. It's a little difficult to see on the screen. I just finished presenting to Albany today, and then tomorrow we're going to be in Chansey in the Plains. I presented in Gloucester. Also, I'm doing it to multiple councils. So I presented to Gloucester Council last week as well. And the whole idea is just to get a feel of is this the right way for us to fund transportation in the county? How do people feel about it? Is there any other way that we could do this? So with this presentation, I just want to give an idea of where we are with transportation in the county, kind of what's happening right now, and then where we could be if we were to have this funding. So for me, with the Mobility Management Program, there's 29 of us in the state of Ohio. We're mostly funded by the Ohio Department of Transportation. It's 80% funded and 20% locally funded. So for Athens, the local funding is made up from the City of Athens, the Athens County Commissioners, Athens County Children's Services, and Athens County Board of DD. So the idea of the position is to be kind of this all-encompassing transportation initiative for the whole county that we serve. And some people serve multiple counties. So there's three things that we're mostly tasked with, and the first one is education, so educating community members on their current transportation needs, taking calls directly to help them get connected with what they need and what is offered to them in the county or outside the county, connecting them with other things. The second thing is advocating for transportation, so advocating for funding from local authorities, from the state, from federal authorities, applying for grants and things like that. And the third thing is collaborating with all transportation providers, so private and public. So even though I'm a HAPCAP employee, I work with all transportation in the county, not just HAPCAP transportation, to work together to kind of fill those gaps with what we have right now. Another big task that we're tasked with is doing the coordinated transportation plan for each county. So Athens has had one since 2003. But in 2017, ODOT required that all counties completely redid theirs. So that was my big task for 2017. I had a lot of dreams about this in the night when I was doing this. But to give you an idea of how big this plan is, this is a copy of it. I didn't want to print you all out one because save paper and things like that. But how it's set up is the coordinated plan is just a bunch of census data in the beginning. In the middle is all the transportation providers that we have in the county, what kind of vehicles they have, when they operate, so we know exactly what we have. We also did, I believe it was 6 surveys in the county. So we did one for the general public, one for seniors, one for individuals with disabilities, one for nonprofit organizations. What do they see with the clients they serve with transportation? And one for for-profit. What do they see with their employees getting to work and stuff like that? I also held 6 roundtables across the county to talk to folks about transportation in the area. And basically we took all of that data together. We have a coordinated transportation planning committee and came up with 10 major goals, basically. It's kind of a roadmap for the county for the next 10 years for transportation. But to give you a little idea, this is, I kind of get this out on the next slide, but what people said on the surveys. So we got a lot of surveys back, over 300 from folks about what they wanted with transportation. And to kind of give you an idea, these are some exact quotes from folks that we got. And one was, an actual countywide system needs, and that was all caps, they put it in there, to be implemented. So majority of people need the service that live outside of the service area. More places, more often out in the more rural areas. More wheelchair accessibility and availability on weekends was a big one, especially earlier and later hours. And then bus to Nelsonville, that was also in all caps. We got the all caps multiple times. Bus to Nelsonville, bus to Gloucester, bus to Chansey, and then more routes to the surrounding villages. So what we really saw from this and where we collected what we wanted to see in the county, or what citizens wanted to see, was the first one is an expansion of fixed route services was the #1 priority, to get Athens Public Transit, the fixed route system, further out into the county more. The second one, additional capacity for door-to-door services, especially accessible services, so wheelchair accessible vehicles. There are multiple programs that do that right now, but they're really working at full capacity. To give you an idea, Athens On Demand Transit, a door-to-door service in Athens County, had to turn away 670 people last year. Wow. 113 of those people were in wheelchairs. And last year alone, and Athens On Demand is only in Athens County, they drove 175,000 miles. So that's the equivalent of going around the earth 7 times. And that's all within Athens County, and they still had to turn people away. So that need is massive. There's also continued funding, expansion of service hours, the Athens Active Transportation Plan, which is a plan multiple partners came together with, bike path and trail extensions, addressing energy concerns and coordinating efforts. So with that, just jumping right into what our current transportation is and what we have. There's some specific transportation available for seniors or individuals with disabilities, and that's like United Seniors of Athens County. They go out of county a lot for medical appointments for seniors. COAD operates the RSVP program, which gives transportation to seniors as well. Athens On Demand, which goes anywhere in Athens County for $2 one way with accessible vehicles. And Job and Family Services, which does a lot of the Medicaid transportation. And then we also have a few private providers as well, like Green Cab, the taxi service that goes anywhere in the county, can go out of county as well. Daybreak Ambulette out of Coolville. Lyft and Uber are here, for better or worse, but they are here and operating within Athens, and they can go in the county or outside of the county as well. So there are some options, to work together to kind of fill those gaps. We also operate Go Bus, the intercity transportation. I'm sure you've all seen it, the big green thing. It's hard to miss. It's a beautiful bus. But the main point of Go Bus is to connect the rural areas with more urban centers. So we're really lucky to have this kind of operating out of Athens County. There's 5 stops in Athens, in the county alone. So there's one in Albany, Nelsonville, Athens, Coolville, and another one in Athens at Baker Center. But the main point of Go Bus is to connect the further out. So it's not really to connect those smaller areas. And then our fixed route system, Athens Public Transit, which you're all aware of, just to give you an idea of kind of where we are. The first line we're going to look at is line 2, the red line. So if you can see, yes, it's moving. Okay. So Athens Public Transit line 2 starts where the Athens Public Transit is stopped there. That's the bus hub at Baker Center. That's kind of where all the buses come together and you can transfer. But line 2 goes down to Holzer, turns around, comes back down, and goes around the ridges and back up and continues on going back and forth. The next line is line 3, the yellow line. The yellow line kind of follows line 2. It goes down East State Street. Doesn't go to Holzer. It turns around at Market on East State, goes down past the bus hub and Court Street, continues past the ridges and goes all the way down to Andover Road, where it then turns around and comes back down and continues going back and forth. The next line, line 4, the purple line, I like to call the inner city line because it goes, in the city more. It goes down Home Street, through the library, down East State Street again, and turns around on Market on State. It comes back down and then goes over to the west side a little bit more, down Central Avenue and back again. And then going further out into the county is line 5. Line 5 works a little bit differently, as it works in a circular motion instead of going back and forth. It just goes around the same way the whole time. So it goes down Columbus Road, down 33, through the Plains, goes down 682, back down the Union where it passes Oblenis Hospital, and then goes back up to the center and around again. So working together with that is line 6. So line 6 is a little different than line 5, but it operates in the opposite way to kind of complement line 5. So it goes through the Plains, but instead of going on the highway, it continues on through Chansey, goes down to Job and Family Services, comes down Columbus Road, and then goes back down to the Baker Center. So this is where we are right now, and right now financially this is sustainable for a couple different reasons. How this is funded is every year they apply for ODOT's 5311 funding, and they give their whole budget for what this costs. ODOT can give up to 50% of what that is. Sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 50 if we're lucky. But the point of that is we have to come up with that other 50%. So right now with what we're operating, how that's made is through contract services. So for example, the Ohio University Bobcat Pass is one of them. They also operate 2 apartment complex transportations, the Summit, for example, and back and forth. And that's how they kind of come up with that funding to meet that match. So operating costs for this right now are close to $1.5 million for what this is. And they're financially it's okay. But as we're kind of looking further out into the county, those contract service opportunities become a lot slimmer. So we have to come up with really creative ways. Yeah.
Thank you, Jesse. Just quick, was the 1.5 million combined, or is that the match?
That's everything combined.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Continue, I'm sorry.
Sure, no, that's fine. Any questions? Yeah, just holler at me. I'm happy to do it. So as we are looking out into the county, we need to come up with more creative ways to come up with this money, and it's a lot of money, and these communities don't have that. So an example of what we're going to need looking into the future is the pilot program of Line 7, the green line you can see on here, which is going to connect Nelsonville and Albany. So Line 7, we have been really advocating and getting a lot of funding for this. Mayor Patterson can definitely second this. We've been working really hard on this for a long time. We finally have enough money from organization, from grants, from multiple different local fundings to operate this for 6 months, completely just on that. So that's with no ODOT funding. So how this will work is there'll be 2 buses. There they go. Kind of operating in a circle 8, right? So one will go to Nelsonville and come back down, and they're all going to meet at Baker Center, so they can connect to the other lines as well. So an example of Line 7 is we have the 6 months to operate it to get the data that we need, but when we apply for this on our 5311 funding, we still have to come up with that 50% match. And so to operate Line 7 alone for 1 year is about $185,000 to $190,000, meaning at least we're going to have to come up with $80,000 to $90,000 to keep it going. So looking at that and trying to think of ways in terms of continuing these things, we started to look at the idea of a transportation sales tax. So looking at the state, kind of where Athens is right now with their sales tax, we're at 7%. So that's the green, and it's a little difficult to see. And the light blue is 7.25%. So we're not doing too bad. We're not on the high end. We're a little bit on the low end, but that's where we are in terms of the state. So what we're asking is a 0.25% transportation sales tax increase. So transportation sales tax is unique because it is earmarked for transportation. Another unique thing of a transportation sales tax is each county can only have 1.50% sales tax, period, before they can't have any more. A transportation sales tax does not count towards that. So even though Athens County is at 1.25%, if this were to pass, they would still be able to do another 0.25%, with or without the transportation sales tax on there. So to give you an idea of what that would mean for your general consumer, these are some things I had to buy last weekend. Toilet paper, of course, toothpaste, of course, and socks, because I don't know if my dryer is eating them or my dog is hiding them. I have yet to find out, but when I do. But, so just to give you an idea of how much this would cost. So if I were to go buy this last weekend, which I did, with 7% sales tax, the total would be $30.82 or $2.02 sales tax. With the 0.25% transportation raise that would be for sales tax, that would come out to $30.90 or $2.09. So a 6 cents difference. So really, for the general consumer, people spending money in Athens County, it's not going to be very noticeable. We're going to be able to use that funding that we kind of come together to kind of go out into the county more and bring more folks into the city in a lot of different ways. So the big picture, and I love this map so much because it's like the dream map, right, is to be able to have enough funding to really get this out in the community. So there's a lot of dream lines here, and this is not for sure. We can change this any way that we want. To have fixed lines that go to Gloucester, Trimble, New Marshfield, Coolville, Amesville, all kind of connecting back into the city of Athens. And the blue represents all of the door-to-door services, where maybe in the more rural areas, fixed route is not the best option. Getting more vehicles for United Seniors, for Athens On Demand, for things like that, to kind of really meet that need further out into the county. So in terms of cost, to give you an idea of what the cost would be, This is one of the new bus shelters that was just put in on East State Street. They look super nice. Every time I pass them by, I'm like almost crash into someone looking at them because they're so great. But the cost of one of those is about $8,000, and that's without installation. So we can really look at this too as not using it just on purchasing buses or making new routes, but as infrastructure as well. Bus shelters, sidewalks, things like that. A bus for Athens Public Transit that they use typically costs about $90,000. So if we had the funding to buy that immediately, we could buy it immediately. We wouldn't have to wait for ODOT to kind of, they have a lot going on, but it takes some time to get things from them. We would have the ability to do that on our own. And an accessible vehicle like United Seniors or Athens On Demand uses is about $35,000. So, to purchase one of those to kind of meet that need of the 670 people that aren't getting that service. And then this funding can also be used for things like Complete Streets initiatives. So it's not just tire on the ground transportation. This could be used for sidewalk installations. This could be used for widening streets, for bike lanes, for match money, for bike paths. It can be used for a variety of different transportation things. And also looking even further down the road, we can look at the idea of a facility for transportation in general. So in 2017, Athens Public Transit did a feasibility study for their current bus shelter, no, not shelter, I guess bus big shelter, bus garage, there it is, and how it works with them. And they did it with ODOT and a consulting group called KFH Group. And what they came up with was it's too small for them even now. It doesn't really fit the needs that they need. Eventually, they're going to have to, go even bigger. And if that involves building a new one or finding a new space that they can renovate, that's way in the future. But if we have this money, then we have more opportunity to apply for federal grants for this. And with the federal grants, we also have the opportunity to look into clean fuels. Like the FTA Low No Emission Grant is a huge grant that I think, we would be really favorable for if we had the match money. So kind of looking way down the road, this is something that could be used towards that as well. So with that, as I'm going around talking, to different councils and different community members about that, if there's any questions, concerns, the good, the bad, the ugly, that's what I'm here for. So yeah, or whoever.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight and for your presentation. I have some questions to start with. The question on the Go Bus, you indicated it stopped at different places in Athens. Do you know what the rate is for that? Because I think it's like $10 to Cleveland. They're not charged the $10 fee, are they? I mean,
no, they have the one. If it's one stopover, it's about $5.
$5
Yeah.
to just go a short distance?
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
kind of where it kind of comes into play, where the Go Bus is meant to be more of like a longer distance
Okay.
one than a short one.
Okay, and some of the other questions, my main concern is that I see at times buses being underutilized or empty, driving around just kind of thing. And I think a lot of people have the impression, especially if the students aren't here, that nobody's really using them. So part of my question is, what kind of service is going to be provided as far as times and how often for these proposals? Because we have this image of somebody needing to get to work, say, from Chauncey or Gloucester. Maybe they come into Athens and they're working somewhere. They don't have a lot of money, and it would be nice if they could actually get in to working time in the morning. So one of the questions would be, is that what we're gearing it towards, or is it just geared towards a few times during the day, and in which case, who is really utilizing it then? And the final question with that is, when you talk about a lot of people being turned away, is that instances where they're being turned away as opposed to like being on a list and turned away? Does that make sense, that
Yeah,
question?
no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. So for your first question, in terms of how often, it really depends on the population. So for Nelsonville and Albany, how we're kind of doing the new Line 7, it's going to be the same as it is in the city. So it'll be at the stop every hour, basically. So it'll be at the same stop every hour.
What time would it start?
I think we're looking at starting at about 6:45. And that's kind of the thing, too, is like expanding the hours as well, like earlier or later, because
Okay.
it's just funding is why we wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, it's definitely to get people to work and back. But also with this, we would be able to look at Athens On Demand Transit or, any other entity to open it up to the general public. So right now, Athens On Demand is only for seniors or individuals with disabilities or people that might be on Medicaid. But we would have the opportunity with this to open it up to everybody. So say if someone's in Gloucester and the bus only goes there maybe like once every 2 hours, but they need to get to work, they could call Athens On Demand if we had the funding to open it up to everybody, and they could pick them up at the time that they needed. So it's kind of, working, back to back together to meet that need. And then your second question, I'm sorry, I think I got lost there.
So did I. I mean, I didn't remember them all. Maybe the last question, do you remember what that was? Could we play the tape back?
Yeah.
As I said, my real concern was just how often they'd be utilized and how people are utilizing them.
Right.
So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're saying that it would be early and kind of often. Kind of tying into it, too, and when you said the bit about your questionnaire that you were asking people, and some people were emphasizing we really need this kind of thing. I just have kind of a question. Did that questionnaire clarify as to how often they would be using it or for what reasons they would be using it?
No, the questionnaire was just for the coordinated plan. So basically the question we asked them was, what are your transportation needs? And then the one that really listed out, a bus to Nelsonville, bus to Gloucester, was like, what would you like to see happen with transportation in the county? So really open-ended, and that was kind of what they said. But I mean, for the utilization of the buses, I know with the fixed route systems, we've seen, I think, read a 700% increase since 2011. So last year, there was over 500,000 people that rode the fixed route buses. So even though it seems like, they're empty sometimes, especially like line 5 and 6, for example.
Well, that's because the students ride for free, isn't it? I mean,
but they don't make up most of the ridership. So I don't want to be quoted on this, but I kind of am because I'm on video, but I think it's anywhere between 10 to 20% of the riders are students. So it's not, they don't make up the most of the riders that are riding. It's mostly community members. But yeah, I think that, that's a good conversation to get into, is like some rural communities they wouldn't be better served with a fixed route system. That's kind of where the door-to-doors have to come in to really meet that need. And in order to meet that need, and I just remembered your other question, why they got turned away from the fixed route system. Yes. The only reason that I know that they got turned away from Athens On Demand was a complete lack of capacity. They can't fit anyone in.
Okay.
They are completely booked, and they're operating Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I know they have had to turn away people who are just trying to get to dialysis appointments. So really serious things, just because they don't have the capacity to serve them. And I think that's true also with United Seniors and RSVP and other programs as well.
but again, it's not a list. It's just if you call up and say, I need an appointment, I need to use this on this day, and if they say, no, we're booked, we can't do it, you can still call for the next day. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll try to fit you in as much as they can.
I appreciate that. And I think they do a remarkable job. I don't want you to think I'm criticizing them, because I'm not.
No. I love these questions. This is why I'm here.
Good.
Yeah.
Member Crowell.
Thanks for coming, Ms. Schmitzler.
Sure.
Great presentation. I'm curious if you have any projections on what the transportation sales tax will provide in a year.
Yeah, we put in the official request to the county auditor to get back with us with what that would be. I haven't heard back yet, but they had estimated it would be around $900,000 to $1 million a year. So kind of looking at that with, for example, line 7 would cost about $190,000 a year. With the 50% off would be about $90,000 a year. That really opens us up, to use a lot of that money towards other lines as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And we went a little backwards, but I'm okay. I had a question about because it's the tax would go to funding new infrastructure. Is that correct? It sounded like that was, because what I also wonder is, it seems like a lot of times the conversation that we have here is that that our pots are shrinking. So I'm kind of also wondering, like what does the ODOT funding, looking forward, what are some systems that are could be in peril just because we're watching things change? We had that conversation a year or two ago about Medicaid, and how, and so where are we at, or like what is your agency kind of tracking and understanding as we go forward, and are we looking, is this going to help replace some of those gaps, or is it just hoping to just try to expand the system?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So with Medicaid transportation changing in the state of Ohio, we don't really know where that's going to go right now. Last that we heard, and kind of what ODOT was trying to, push forward with the Department of Medicaid. Right now, all the transportation, that's funded by Medicaid goes through local job and family services. It gets funded out through other transportation organizations. So in Athens JFS gets that money. They contract out with like Athens On Demand Transit. They operate transportation on their own with, Green Cab, other transportation entities. The Department of Medicaid kind of is looking at changing that to potentially a statewide system, which means it's going to go just into one big statewide thing, and then it's going to be statewide transportation that's going to get that money. So it really takes a lot of funding out of the county, and a lot of transportation providers, especially local ones, rely on that for matching funds. So there's a big scare in the transportation community of what that's going to mean. ODOT is really pushing for them to at least regionalize it, which would mean that kind of like Buckeye Hills, their region for Southeast Ohio, which is our regional transportation planning organization, it would just be that. So I think it's like Meigs, Athens, I think there's like 10 counties, Washington County, to kind of do that. So we don't know where that's going to go. We're keeping a close eye on it, but there is the chance that this funding could really be the lifeline to keep our transportation what it is in Athens County. So we don't have to rely on the state. They've already done this in a couple other states. One is Michigan, and it's not going very well at all. We're keeping a close eye on it, but it doesn't seem to be improving. So this is really a fail-safe for us, no matter where it goes with that. And then also with ODOT funding, with the gas tax that was passed earlier this year, $70 million was given to public transportation in Ohio. That's not coming out of the gas tax. That's going to be coming out of the general revenue fund. Normally they give about $30 million, so it's about double what they usually give. But because it's coming out of the general revenue fund, that means every 2 years we're going to have to fight like heck for it. And probably every day we're going to have to fight like heck for it to come to the rural areas of the state. So again, we don't really know where that money is going to go right now. They're still trying to figure it out. We don't know how long we're going to have that funding. So again, this is kind of a fail-safe way for us to, keep it local and keep it, we're safe here. People can have a ride with someone that they trust.
Okay, great. Jesse, thank you so much. Mayor.
I just had a follow-on to Councilmember McGee's question about the list, where sometimes they can't accommodate everyone who's on that list, especially for Athens On Demand. There was an individual who contacted me, a month or two ago, and was concerned about being able to get a ride up to Columbus to provide health care for one of their children. And I referred them to Jesse, and as well to Jessica Stroh, to Kelly Hattis, to Amber Hewitt, to a number of people up at HapCap, and it was amazing at how well they were able to work quickly to accommodate and not, I'm not sure as to what transportation they found for this individual, but they were able to get this person to an appointment up in Columbus, which was much needed. So I know how hard HapCap works in trying to expand our transportation and also coordinating with other providers that are out there. To speak just briefly to the expanded Route 7, I know that Jesse's worked really hard on that as well. And before Jesse, it was Michael Lockman. We've spent 4 years working on this to get this to the point that it is now. We've also brought in people like Representative Edwards to make sure he knows that we need, more funding, whether it's through this tax or even 5311 helping out in any other way they can for not only Route 7, but again for expansion. There used to be a system back in the day called Aorta that ran transit throughout the county, and then things changed over time. And I think, this is Jesse's vision and certainly mine, hopefully it's council's as well, to where this can expand once again and provide rides not only for jobs, but that's great and highly important, but also medical visits. If you think about it, think about Athens as being essentially the medical hub for primary care and specialized care that isn't required with a highly, some other specialist that might not be in the city of Athens at either of our medical facilities. But it's certainly providing specialized care here and people being able to get on them. And I also see this as this is a quality of life transportation line. I see people utilizing this during the summer where, our youth can get on this and come into the city of Athens or go to the city of Nelsonville or to the village of Albany, and kind of expanding people's horizons. It's possible that we could see college students from Hocking College and Ohio University hopping on this on an hourly basis to take classes that may not be offered at one institution or the other. So I see so many advantages to having this take place and moving us forward. It's exciting, but not just that. Again, to hear Jesse talk about, the potential expansion up into the Gloucester, Trimble area, I hear that a lot. That I would certainly like to see transit to where I could hop on the bus and come from Gloucester, Trimble, Jacksonville down here to Athens, or beyond, anywhere else, into Nelsonville or somewhere. But I really have to applaud you for all your tenacity.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, you
persistence. It was a team effort.
Yeah.
But I think that this is important for council to think about and reach out to your constituents to see what their feelings are on a transportation tax. I know that I believe it's June 17th is the meeting here in Athens.
Yes.
At the public library. There's a meeting in the morning at
10.
10?
Yes.
And another one at 5:30 in the
Yes.
evening, both of those at the Athens Public Library. I pushed it out during my press conference, and I think I strongly encourage the citizens of Athens to come and at least listen to what you're hearing tonight.
What date was that again?
June 17th
Thank you.
at the Athens Public Library.
That's next Monday. Yes, Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Schmitzer, for your presentation.
Yeah.
I want to echo something similar to what the mayor said. We are the county seat, the city of Athens, and a lot of services are being provided and originate here in the city of Athens. Anything we can do to assist in that accommodation, I think, is well deserved, and I can only imagine how frustrating it would be to be unable to access transportation, especially with some of the limitations of dealing with a disability. I do know that we have a question or comment from a council member who is in our audience this evening.
Yeah.
She may want to share the podium there, or
Yeah.
thank you, Councilmember Grace.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah Grace, 165 North Congress Street. And I was just wondering, along with my fellow council members sitting here in the audience, with the sales tax that's earmarked for transportation, but I mean, it could pay for new routes, infrastructure, bus shelter, sidewalks. Who controls the money? Who makes decisions about what specific projects it's going to be spent on?
Sure. Because it's a county-wide sales tax, the commissioners would be the ones that would vote to put it on the ballot, and they would be the ones in control of the money. Essentially, we would have a voice in what that is spent for. And I think because it's a transportation sales tax, and that's what people are voting on, it's really held up to a higher standard than the general sales tax. But yeah, it's up to them, and we can advocate for what that's spent for. Yeah.
All right. Mayor.
I just have
Yes,
one last
no, that's good. Go right ahead, please.
And it's Councilmember Butler that brought this to mind, is that, throughout our county, there are a number of people, for whatever reason, who may have lost their driver's license. And since we are the county seat where we have the court system here in Athens, it also provides another form of transportation for someone to, in some cases, get to court in time. So.
Okay. Jesse, thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
thank
for
you for
coming this
having me.
evening. Yeah, no, this is a
Appreciate it.
great
Thank you.
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along, complete streets. And so just to I'm sure a lot of people remember this. We brought it forward and had some discussion about it. I brought the ordinance forward, tabled it to bring it back to discussion, and I was slated to do it at the last committee meeting, but I decided to postpone it so that we didn't go 4.5 hours. So here it is. And so basically, in that time, because of the sunshine laws, I haven't had any discussion with anybody up here, and it's a little frustrating because I do like to have those conversations, and I do like to collaborate and understand kind of all sides to that discussion and conversation. So what I ended up doing was I did put a call out to Jordan Whistler, who is the active transportation person at ODOT up in Columbus. Had a conversation with him. He also then directed me to the city of Cleveland Heights. And they actually had a resolution that was passed last year that was actually pretty thorough. And looking through that resolution and having additional conversations, just trying to wrap my head around that, the idea of the exceptions, and if the exceptions were not acceptable, and so that is. For me, myself, I'm okay with it, and that's kind of where I'm currently at. Because one of the conversations with Jordan at ODOT, we talked about what these policies mean, and he said, really, the bottom line is you have to have, a mayor administration that's in support of these, and we have that. And I think that we have to keep that in mind as we, as the next person is selected to be, to be the next mayor whenever that happens. And so the whatever legislation we put forward, it's still a strong mayor, situation where it doesn't, and so. But the one thing that I did see when looking at this resolution from Cleveland Heights, and they do have an exceptions area on it, and I can. What I'll do is I will put this out to council members so that they can see this. I apologize that I didn't do it sooner. I've had other things going on, but the one thing was. In the exceptions, the city manager, after consultation with the director of public works, director of planning and development, manager of capital projects, and the transportation advisory committee, issues a documented exception. And so I see there's about 5 different entities that are coming together to make that decision. I don't think we have that structure currently right now. And so, if we did have a group that was coming together to make exceptions, they would all be working under the mayor. And so, my question is, are we thinking about? I don't know what we're thinking about. Let's have some other people talk about this. Member Crowell, yes, yeah.
So what I'm thinking about, and I don't know how Cleveland Heights, obviously a very different community than our community, deals with this or has in the past year. But as I understood it, the way we originally wrote the Complete Streets ordinance, or at least when we reviewed it through the workshop, mm-hmm. and the points that were being recommended to us, is that not that I don't trust the mayor and I don't trust the city administration, but why not provide the justification for the exceptions? That's all that we've asked for, right? Is mm-hmm. please an annual report that says, in this case, we did not follow the Complete Streets because, which it's going to be determined anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the city administrator is going to get together and they're going to follow through their normal, and they're going to say at some point, well, you know what? This doesn't make sense for this reason. They're going to know it, and all that we've asked in the ordinance, I believe, is for them to make that public knowledge. So why wouldn't we ask for that? That's mm-hmm. my question.
Okay. We did receive. Yeah, actually, everybody did receive. Some of the original wording in that in the ordinance, and that any exceptions to this program, including for private projects, must be approved by the City of Athens Board of Works and Public Safety. And so I guess my question is, what is that? Where does it exist? And I'm sorry, I'm pulling this up, and I'm
Yeah.
sure nobody else is necessarily prepared for this, but it's, it sounds like something that it's not there. So I don't know if we're talking about, are we looking to create something stronger within this, that there's additional, or you would just like to see the city safety director provide a reason why
Yes.
that exception is there.
That's what I thought the changes to the ordinance was lacking, was
Okay.
that piece.
And my understanding was, I felt like we wanted to have additional people come into the process to provide that, provide that exception. Because what is, when you talk about a complete street is, it could be many different things.
Sure.
So how do we determine what's an exception versus, not an exception based on the specific needs or use of that street? So these are the things that I've,
Right.
it hasn't kept me up at night, but
No.
they do roll around in my head.
And none of us are engineers.
No.
Right.
No, but the planners told me I'm a planner, but
Right.
I even question that. Right.
I mean, I'm glad we're having the conversation.
Yeah.
I think we can get this, I think we can improve upon what we had out. Now, whether it's just being very transparent really is what I'm looking for about why we have chosen not to put a bike lane on this street, or not to do curb cuts for ADA, or why we decided not to put bike rack in this location, or any of those questions. I think the public's going to want to know if it gets built and then it's not there, and then we don't have any kind of annual reporting that says, well here's your answer.
And I do feel like we do have the reporting, in that, but it doesn't, I guess what you would say is it doesn't include those exceptions.
Correct.
Because we have the performance measures, I guess, at the end of the document. Yes, Pro Tem, you have.
Well, thank you. And to echo this desire to have transparency, at the same time to not burden the administration with a million more layers of bureaucracy at the same time. So the accountability, I think, is needed so that the public is aware why, but at the same time doing so in a efficient manner that isn't adding that much more to their already busy routines. Correct. That would be me playing a little devil's advocate.
That's not, and I'm more on that side. That's where I'm at. I don't want to cloud the process
Right.
to the point where we're seeing additional time and effort being put towards defense of what's probably already a good project.
Right. And if on the front end, if we're putting that time into the planning process, because we do have a good system in place with public input and open dialogue, we're fortunate that exists in our administration, and the template's been there. And I think if that continues to be the case, then we're all the better. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. Mayor, we're talking about you.
To my face.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Those guys.
Which is your job. I have a couple thoughts for council, and that is, well, one in which, if we're producing a written explanation as to why not, we've now created a public record, which we can certainly keep and we will keep, and have those as minutes from the conversation as to what transpired, I guess, if you will. Another thing is that, when we have the auditors meetings, we have the chair from the finance committee who sits in those meetings, and we're talking about the city's financials and what needs to be purchased and so on and so forth. So Councilmember Reisner is there during those meetings, and I don't personally see a problem with, in the early planning process, of having the chair of transportation who's sitting there with the service safety director and the director for engineering and public works, any of the other engineers as we're talking through these things. I just extend that as an option so that in terms of transparency, that someone from the transportation committee is there and can be a part of that process, but that's up to council.
Okay.
Because I'm hearing you from the Cleveland Heights, it sounds like the structure that they've got, they may have created a council or a, whatever you described it as, or
Yeah.
something.
Subcommittee or,
But they are a council city manager form of government as well, with what you were describing, because it had the city manager in there, and I just looked it up, and that's what their structure is, opposed to what you just mentioned, to where we're a mayor council form of government.
You know, and I will say that, you know, the majority of these things that I've, these complete streets that I've read, they're resolutions. It's not policy. You know, so I think us just going forward, even with an ordinance, really puts a bigger stake in the ground. It really says this is, you know, we're planting the flag, and this is what we believe in, and I would hope that would influence, you know, other people that are looking, you know, to help shape this community in the future, that this was what was recognized, you know, way back then. So, you know, I'm glad that we are looking at this, and that we're not talking about it. And I think I at least have a little bit more to move forward. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. I bet there are. Yes. All right. Thank you.
I'm Rob Delac, 124 Morris Avenue here in the city. So I think the things you're talking about are exactly what we need. There's the Complete Streets Coalition has put together a list of 10 items that are what they see as required really for a good Complete Streets policy. We check 8 of those boxes right now. Item 10 is something I don't think that really applies here, which is implementation. So that goes into things like changing guidance and design for streets and things. We don't have those things. So item 10, I don't think implementation is really necessary for Athens. But item number 4 is the exceptions, about the exceptions. And we've got half of it, which is a high-level review and decision maker. That's making that decision and saying there's an exception, we really need to make an exception here. And Andy Stone is high level. That's definitely, I think, the right person to make the decision. So that's also good. It's the other half of the exception is what we're missing is the documentation of that. So documentation and transparency. So documenting there's an exception, why there's the exception, and making that publicly available. I guess it could be through minutes for a meeting, as long as that's readily available to the public. Sometimes those things are not as easily accessed by the public. So the key is the public should get the information, but council is really oversight. So council really should be making sure that they get that information from the city. And I think including transportation chair is a good idea in those meetings as well. So if we make the process transparent, document it properly, make it publicly available so that the public knows, council knows what's going on, I think that's the key, and that fixes the concerns that I had and that others I think have had. And I will also point out that the reporting, the annual report, an addition that was put in was to, I don't know if it was list the exceptions, but document the exceptions, at least in numbers there. And that's a nice addition. So additional reporting like that's useful too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Did I just get signed up for more meetings? I don't know.
maybe.
And, you know, and I'll just one last thing here. I do want to mention too this resolution from Cleveland Heights. It's a complete and green street policy. So I think it's really interesting that they also incorporated, you know, a lot of removing the not introducing the water into the storm sewers in this policy. This might be something in the future that more of these things will have. So, okay. With that, we're going to And Don with Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katsas. That moves us forward on the agenda for the evening to the City Safety Services Committee, which I will be chairing and will be accompanied by Councilmember Fall and Councilmember Grace. So we'll pause briefly as they join us. We do have 4 talking points this evening. I will list those briefly here. The Athens Public Transit Bus Disposal, followed by Franklin Avenue Sanitary Sewer Repair, College Street Sanitary Sewer Repair, and then lastly, Columbia Avenue Sewer Repair. Seems to be a trend. Okay, we're all here and mic'd up. Thank you. We'll begin with the conversation about the Athens Public Transit Bus Disposal. I am in receipt, I believe, of email conversation here acknowledging that there's a request to dispose of one of the Athens Public Transit buses. It appears that we have a transmission that is no longer operating properly, as well as air conditioning that is not working. Likewise, it will not run due to the throttle body, which is also in need of being replaced. There's a request from HABCAP to have this sent directly to scrap, is my understanding. Any questions or comments? Any conversation? Anything from the mayor's office? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, moving forward then with the agenda, we're looking at sanitary sewer repairs. On Franklin Avenue, we have problematic line request. Let's see here, authorization and appropriation of $45,000 for emergency sanitary sewer repair on Franklin. We have a failing 6-inch clay sanitary sewer. Again, we know that we have aging infrastructure within the city. We know that the city was founded not yesterday, and consequently that our systems require maintenance and upgrades, and it's completely understandable and normal for this to happen. I do believe that this is a trend because of our aging infrastructure. Let's try and see if I have any other notes here. Believe here from Andy Stone, our City Service Safety Director, the Franklin line is problematic. If major failure occurs, they will dig it up and conduct a point repair. Any questions or comments about Franklin Avenue needs? College Street, similar. The note we have from Mr. Stone is that this is our most urgent matter. This is a continued sinkhole on College Street due to very deep failing sewer. And let's see here. There was a request for transfer from TC 500 line to address this need. Seeing if I have any other notes on College. My understanding is that this is the 3rd sinkhole in 2019, and authorization and appropriation request for $47,000 for this particular project, which would be permanent repair of the lining of the existing failing 8-inch clay sanitary sewer line. Any questions or comments? Mayor?
This is a really deep line on College. You know, we've had a lot of disruptions already this spring with some failures. As you've mentioned, this is the 3rd sinkhole to open up. This would be a cast-in-place sleeve that liner that we'll put through. But college is one of it's deep, as I mentioned. It's also one of our older lines in the city. The Director for Engineering and Public Works feels that this sleeve will certainly alleviate the problems we've been having down there. But as you mentioned, we're an old city.
Yeah, 1797. Yeah, just a few years
I don't think
ago.
there was sewer back then.
Right. Right. Thank you, Mayor. Anything else regarding that? Council? Yes, Councilmember Grace.
This is what we've been seeing through the spring on College between Washington and Mill, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
From the community? Lastly, we're looking at needs as well for Columbia Avenue. As noted from Andy Stone, this is a major effort. We have a failure there as well. This is a little more challenging because we're in conversation with FEMA regarding this one. It has been approved for $40,000, but the repair estimate is much higher, with numbers in the $350,000 range estimated. So Mr. Stone has acknowledged that the city is submitting a 3-part report to FEMA to appeal and request a higher amount. So there's some needs and challenges along this line. Not quite sure how soon we'll hear back from them, obviously, but there is a desire to address this need and not let it go without the attention it requires. I don't know if Mayor, too, if you'd like to add.
Service Safety Director Andy Stone feels that we may be hearing back from FEMA mid-July while council is on recess in terms of this 3-party appeal to FEMA. As you may have already indicated, Councilmember Butler,
It's okay.
that we're estimating that this project would be about $350,000. And what FEMA has authorized at this point is $40,000. So our appeal is for the greater amount of what we think this is going to cost. But you never know with FEMA. So we're hoping to hear mid-July.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Grace?
This is because of a slip, correct? Due to like heavy rainfall? Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct.
And when did the slip occur? Do you remember?
I don't see that in my notes, if I may interject. The city does have a narrow easement for this sewer within this project. And the challenges, again, are with the acknowledgement that the slip was on private property, but we do have an easement nearby.
That's correct. I don't know the date of when the slip was initially identified. There have been so many slips throughout the city, you know, as Service Safety Director would tell you, that the city of Athens is wanting to move its way down to the riverbed.
Yeah.
And it's,
As hills do.
right.
Hills.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Grace. Any other comments, questions? Anything from the audience? Thank you, everyone. So proceeding forward, that will conclude City Service Safety. That moves us forward on our agenda this evening. Again, Monday, June 10th. Planning and Development Committee, which is chaired this evening by Councilmember Chris Fall, and she will be accompanied by Councilmember Reisner, Councilmember McGee, and Councilmember Grace. We have one talking point this evening. Thank you, Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. This is pretty simple. Many moons ago, we put in some downtown redevelopment programs forward to the state. We've gotten comments back about it, what's been accepted, what's not been accepted. They would like us to amend one of the applications to remove one of the parcels because they feel that it is too far away from the center of the redevelopment.
Interesting.
Yes. So they have specific things they like to look for and certain requirements having to do with compactness and stuff. Otherwise, you might get some gerrymandery looking DRDs.
Which district?
Which one this is?
Yeah,
This
as
is the
like,
the Washington one.
234 Washington,
Yeah.
DRD.
Right. So they want us to remove the furthest parcel out. Mayor?
We had a conference call, when I say we, Nate Green from Montrose Group, Sarah Mars Maxfield from the Athens County Economic Development Council, and I were on the phone with Matthew Hollis from the Ohio Taxation, and they, Department of Taxation, they also had a couple other issues, but when we talked them through the process, that one of the issues was not having the parcel number for the historic building that has to be an anchor for any DRD, but we had attachments, and so they did recognize that we were good with what we had identified as being historic, the historic building or district within the DRDs. So one of them has been vacated and granted, and that is the Athens Depot DRD. We're still questioning the reasons for the other two that are being brought up, and as you mentioned, one of the parcels we used West Washington. Essentially, it looks to be maybe 500 feet of West Washington, to include another developable piece of property. But what we'll, as Member Paul mentioned, we can certainly amend to remove that one parcel. The one that we're really being challenged with, and it's going to be challenging to solve, is the Sheltering Arms Downtown Redevelopment District. So more to come on that one. Hopefully council will see to it to amending, removing this one particular parcel. We're calling it parcel 15, even though it's got a full parcel number associated with it, for the 234 West Washington DRD.
That will come forward. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one. How many DRDs do we have in Athens?
We've only applied for 3. And what was really interesting, Member McGee, I'm glad you asked that question, is in our conversations with Matthew Hollis up at the Department of Taxation, is that we apparently are the first city to get this far in the process. So they're trying to understand all of this process at the Department of Taxation along with us. So it was a fruitful conversation to be on the phone and kind of talk through things with that department, to where, again, they did vacate and grant one of the 3 DRDs, but I was rather shocked to hear that we're the first city in the state that has gotten this far in the process of having active downtown redevelopment districts. That was my look too, not Councilmember McGee, was really. But that's what he informed us.
It's a relatively new program,
It's very new.
and so we're a model. We love being a model. So push that envelope. So, any other questions? Great. Thank you. That's the end of my.
And thank you, Mayor. Often the footwork that goes into making forward-thinking ideas reality is often lacking the praise and applause. It takes a lot of time. So thank you for, as well as Sarah Mars and the others that accompanied you. Thank you. Anything else? Does that conclude that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, thank you, everyone. We're moving forward with Finance and Personnel Committee. This is chaired by Councilmember Jeff Reisner, and myself, Councilmember Katsas, and Councilmember Kroll will accompany Councilmember Reisner, and there is one talking point this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. One boilerplate boil it.
Yeah, easy for you to say.
It certainly is. Too late for me. I should be in bed. Appropriations and transfers. You've already touched on, under transportation, the $47,000 transfer for the repair of the College Street sanitary sewer line. Just to be clear, that's from the sewer plant to the sewer maintenance fund. The other item is request for $3,000 to the water fund to add safety lights, utility cap, bed liner, and rust proofing to the new water meter truck. And our city engineer has requested that this ordinance be suspended first reading. I'm not quite sure probably because we're going to go on break, or is there some other emergency that? Mayor? Okay.
Yeah, we can look into that.
No, we'll find out on Monday. So that's all I have. If anyone wants to discuss about a new water meter truck, that's very exciting.
Questions, comments for the chair? None? None from the audience? Thank you, Chair Reisner. That moves us, thank you everyone. We're welcoming everyone back up to the dais here for Committee of the Whole. 2 talking points as my colleagues rejoin us. Again, this is Committee of the Whole, and we have 2 talking points this evening: University Estates Development and the TIF agreement, followed by a conversation or update on the compost program. I do welcome input and conversation from the executive branch as well as my fellow legislators. I have a few talking points for the University Estates Development TIF agreement. If you recall, our City Service Safety Director, Andy Stone, spoke with us during our marathon committee meeting 2 weeks ago. Many of us were also short on sleep that night because we were warned of major calamity with the tornado touching down nearby. So jog your memories and look back at your notes. My understanding is that this is still in review through legal counsel and looking at the request from Mr. Stone. I don't know if there's other questions or comments from my colleagues, or if the mayor's office wants to talk about where we're at with anything on this.
Well, I think some
Yeah,
background.
Councilman. Sure, thank you.
We do TIFs. East State Street is a TIF, tax increment financing. This particular one is a little bit different. It holds, a lot of times in certain types of TIFs, some of the money that is being earned towards that incremental financing doesn't make the schools whole. And that was one of the concerns about TIFs in the past. This particular TIF will not impact any school financing. It will also stay within the infrastructure of this particular development, the development that's being put forward, which will be up in the University Estates. It will be 50 units, and it will be an affordable housing mix of houses, 2 and 3 bedroom, with 3 bedrooms being in universal design. Within the TIF agreement, there is wording about making sure that it's cluster designed with net neutral and solar programs being in mind when they do the development. So it's really a really exciting model that we may be able to put forward, putting conservation ideas, both land and energy and resources, along with one of the big problems that we have in our area of affordable housing, not just to buy, but to also to run as a household in the future because of lowered bills and things. And I think that it can serve as a model for other programs that can go forward. So This will have to go through the TIF and the wording, the 16 pages of, I'm so glad that Lisa has to read it and tell us what to do, because it is legal and dense. But at the same time, this is not the end of the project, it's not the end of the process. This will also have to go through a plan unit development process, which we haven't done for a long time. So that's lots of excitement. It has public hearings that have to happen through that process, and it's very inclusive of council in going forward. So, is that a good description?
No, that's excellent. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Fall.
Here. Good job.
I know that the mayor has a talking point to add as well for our conversation. Thank you, Mayor.
We've been working on this for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I was at a conference a year ago, I believe. Actually, that's not true. It was 3 years ago, when in 2016, the DRDs were introduced, which is what we were just talking about with Downtown Redevelopment District, but I also became aware of other forms of TIFs. A DRD is basically a TIF as well. It's just kind of a different breed of TIF. As we all know, the city does have a TIF on East State Street, and that is at 3100, which means it's 30 years at 100% capture over that course of time, to which you do have to go to the school board, the school district, and get approval. With this, it's not that, it's a 1075, which means it's a 10-year, 75% capture of increased property valuation. And if you think about it, for an undeveloped lot, whatever that's appraised at currently, because there is no structure on it or utilities to it, and then now you develop that 75% capture and the remaining 25 that gets dispersed to, among others, the school district. And if that home or homes are at the $200,000 price point, do the math, in terms of that increased valuation and that 25% that would be going to, among others, the school district, that, as Councilmember Fall indicated, that they would be getting either the same or an increase in whatever the taxation is of that property, of which after 10 years, all of it goes to those who receive that property tax, that increase with the valuation. So we see this as win-win. We've been working with Ricker Neckler, an individual named Price Finley, who is one of the two people that I've spoken to in the past at conferences about these in particular, and they've been very helpful in helping to craft the documents that you have before you. Jessie Brenner, our prosecutor for the city, she too has had eyes on and has put a lot of work into making sure that this is right, that we're getting it done correctly. I can't speak for the law director, but I know that she has been in the loop on these as we've been going through this. So it's been an interesting process to go through, and as Councilmember Paul indicated, I too believe that this could become a model for other developable properties in the city of Athens, to where if we can help getting that infrastructure in, which becomes a lot of times cost prohibitive for someone to build homes, if the road and the utilities aren't there, it doesn't pencil out for someone to go ahead and start developing spaces. So this is a mechanism in which we can help stimulate that with the revenue generated by this neighborhood TIF to free that up, and for us as the city of Athens to finally get some housing development once again. And I know council's been working hard with the Affordable Housing Commission. Administration just feels that this is one more tool in our toolbox that will help us achieve that goal of having more affordable housing, because we all know there's a need.
Well, I'd like to point out also, we're proud to be one of the first communities to be doing this, once again, but we set the bar for everybody to have to, and we have pretty high bar when we come, especially to our environment. As we could see by the great recycling discussion that we had and the passion. I think people are really looking and demanding. I think we saw that with the school discussion. They're demanding more because sustainability and climate crisis is here, and we have to follow through on it, and we got to walk the walk. And this is going to be one way to do it, I think. I'd like to say thank you to Sarah Grace because she's taken the Affordable Commission on, and they're the ones who've been doing a lot of hard work in this area too. So I would like to just have a shout out for her. Thank you.
And Michelle Pappy before.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Councilmember Fall. Thank you, Councilmember Grace. I do believe we have a few more talking points. Thank you for the mayor. Councilmember Katsas has questions, comments. Anyone else would like to follow Councilmember Katsas? Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. And I have two questions. One is, when in the process would we take ownership of those public right-of-ways in that infrastructure? And then the other one is, what kind of have we started to poll the citizens that are in that community and start to have we had discussions up there to kind of have them understand what this is and what's coming to a neighborhood near them. Anybody?
I think that's one of the PUD process because it's much more geared to having public input in those sort of things. So before any development or anything that goes on the ground, they will have to have a PUD, planned unit development process. Council gets to vote on that as a yay or a nay. And so it's a very involved with Planning Commission, having public hearings. We have public hearings. So there's the start. This is the start of the conversation.
Okay.
And if I may add, Councilmember Katsas, to some of that as well, I spoke on the phone last week with City Service Safety Director Andy Stone. He and I are tentatively making plans to try to meet face-to-face so that I can become more educated about this as well, since this University Estates falls into the first ward, which I represent. So I need to educate myself as well so that I can help be informed when communicating with citizens from UE, if that helps.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important for, well, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was then wondering, okay, so what is the legislation asking for then? It's asking to move forward with that process.
With the TIF process?
With the TIF process.
Yeah, so that they can get that in place.
And I'm under the I understand that we're doing this now because the contractor has to have some things in place by a certain deadline.
Right.
Okay.
But, and the PUD process is pretty involved through that. So it's going to come back to haunt us. That's what people say sometimes. But it is very involved in the community. So.
Okay.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you. I just wondered on the question of the timing on this with the next session. Will we have an ordinance to
approve the TIF?
Yes, and
The ordinance is on the drive. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago with Andy, and there were some questions which have been answered. But Debbie just reminded one question that was from Chris Nisley about putting a time limit on the rental, being able to rent a unit before it's sold, and maybe that there needs to be some kind of looking at that sort of time rental. That's on page 2 of the agreement. Number 6, providing that housing units may be rented during the period between construction completion and sale. And then the covenants do not apply while renting. The covenants of the various for sale and buying, the covenants that are required because it's a affordable housing development. So I think there was that question of sometimes when things are being developed, they rent the early ones out, they have models and those sort of things. So we just need to look at timing.
Timing.
And stuff about that.
So you want,
Like limits, what kind of limits or timing?
Okay.
And is it the first development to 6 months after the last house was developed, or something, just to see that if there's something in there.
Okay. I don't know that, I don't know if it was you, Councilmember Constance, or not, that, I don't think your question was completely answered.
Correct.
Because you had a two-parter.
Yes, I did.
You talked about the road, the
Yeah.
streets.
Yep.
The infrastructure.
Yes, yeah.
There would be city oversight in looking at the designs and, also approving and accepting those streets upon completion, which is, I think that's vitally important. And we kind of ran into some issues with the early on university estates and us assuming those once it was annexed and making sure that they were in proper condition and whatnot. And this, since these would be brand new streets, we would have even more oversight on that design of what goes in, unlike UE, where we receive what was there and then have to make the improvements through assessments. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, no, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember.
In light of the recent discussions we've had about the Athens City School District buildings process, and Member Fall's point about our values in our community, the agreement simply states that the developer agrees to complete the development in accordance with the city's Affordable Housing Commission goals, which include but are not limited to, and I'm just looking at number 3 here, incorporate concepts of cluster design, zero energy, and solar readiness. I'm wondering what we're asking the developer to do with that.
Cluster design is a type of development that is not a brand new idea. I worked on it up in New England, where you look at the whole, it's not done parcel by parcel necessarily. You try to cluster certain types of infrastructure, houses, those sort of things, so that you protect the values that are on the land. You ensure that things aren't covered. We do a little bit of clustering when we do townhouses and stuff. It's kind of the same idea. But you look at a whole like PUD element and look at the fact that there may be swales that you don't want to go building into. Not the idea that, well, we could just pave it over and make a culvert. So working with the landscape in a much more defined place, it usually, communities that do cluster design tend to have more affordable housing because the infrastructure is a little bit less and those sort of things. There's a lot of models out there. And then the net neutral and those sort of things could be written into the PUD itself too. But the on-the-ground design is the cluster designing idea.
So I don't really question the definition of these, but incorporating concepts of this. We're not being very specific about what we're asking them to do. And is this A, B, and or C? I mean, if they made them solar ready, they could just say, okay, that's enough for cluster design and zero energy?
And that's the discussion going through the PUD process.
Okay.
I think that even going before it, because it's a different type of model that we're developing, that it would make sense for people with some more expertise coming in and looking at helping do the cluster design. I mean, they've done developments up in Columbus where they had cluster design, they had cluster solar, neighborhood solar, and then they did cluster hot water geothermal, and that was on a neighborhood level. So you were clustering the infrastructure, you were clustering the need of services, and that makes it so that it's cheaper and better for the environment all around. And so there's a lot of ones that are out there that are good models. And I'd be more than happy to help in that sort of issue.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Katsas.
And just for clarification, just the, because we're talking about, we say affordable housing, but my thought and my definition of affordable housing isn't the price range. What are the price ranges that we're talking about for these? I mean, is it like
Up to 220,000.
Yes.
up to 220,000? Okay.
Which,
Yes,
Right.
Council, yeah.
that is a price range that has been identified in multiple studies that have looked at housing needs in Athens and in the surrounding area. Is it fills a gap that is not currently being met. Is sort of young professional. Yeah. sort of teachers, yeah, for, yeah, it's
But
a different
yeah.
category than low income is
City
the
employee.
affordable housing that's sort of a mid-range and with that 220 price cap.
Councilmember Grace, can you remind council what that range is? The Affordable Housing Commission?
In the
is?
Affordable Housing Commission, we've looked at 120 to 220 as, but we've talked a very wide range, but that's sort of the target that we've looked at as really being needed in the area.
Thank you. And thank you for the updates and thank you for clarifying. In my conversation with City Service Safety Director Andy Stone, one of the things that we were talking about as well was in the pre-planning of University Estates years ago, this was part of the conversation with the original vision that UE would offer a wide range of housing needs. So we have housing up there that ranges from apartments and condominiums as well to very nice homes and houses, and then the need for this range as well too, which would be affordable housing for young professionals. So I think this also falls into the spirit of that original vision.
I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
affordable housing.
That's what I just, yeah.
Right, but not necessarily only young professionals.
Right.
You know, there's also need for affordable housing for people who are downsizing. And
Correct.
those sort of things. So
Retirees,
Right,
it's a
exactly.
multi-generational.
empty
sort of-
nesters.
Sure,
empty nesters.
right. I would have gotten there eventually. Thank you. The chocolate is wearing off. Any other questions or comments regarding this evening?
Does that need to be suspended?
Not if we keep on track with the schedule that council has before them. Everything should be just fine.
Thank you,
I'll bring
everyone.
that one.
Remaining schedule for June.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have special session. Special versus special.
Maybe
And
specials.
Councilmember Fall has decided to take ownership. She just
I just said I'd bring it forward.
So the clerk is putting it down in the notes there. I see Fall. Thank you. Okay, moving forward then, our last talking point this evening is the compost program. I was reminded by our clerk, thank you, Ms. Walker, that the pilot ends for the compost program. The pilot project ends June 30th. If there's a desire for it to continue, there would potentially be, if all members continue to participate, without support financially, it would be potentially an $18 a month fee, is my understanding. So we have to decide as collectively as a whole whether or not we want to support the compost program pilot ending or continuing. And if we want to continue it, then we have to acknowledge that need and request and desire is there. Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
Okay, the pilot project ends June the 30th. So if we do nothing, it's over.
Correct.
Finished. The council therefore has to make a decision to make this a permanent feature along with recycling and garbage collection, not another extension of the pilot program. I mean, it started at 6 months, extended to a year. Now we're at the end of the year. I met with Andy Stone last week, and he also told me that if it was to continue and the program was an opt-in type of thing, that the person who would want to receive the service would probably have to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 a month in order for the project to be successful. Frankly, I don't see anybody spending $18 a month to take their compost. Our recycle is only $2, and we charge by the bag, $6 or $7 for a garbage pickup. Now we're talking about a 5-gallon bucket of compost for $18. We can't go below $18. Our garbage fund right now is in serious trouble. As chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee, I see what's going on there, and it's declining rapidly because we have been subsidizing our garbage pickup from the extension of our contract from last year in the neighborhood of $300,000. It's declined by $300,000. It'll decline another $300,000 if we don't raise the rates, and in another year, 2.5 years, it'll be exhausted and we'll have a deficit. So if we add $18 in there as a subsidy so that people could have their compost taken away or subsidized at least partially, we're digging the hole deeper and faster. My recommendation is just simply, okay, we had the pilot project, it did this, we got data, we found out the city can't sustain it. And I would say no. If there's an ordinance to come forward to say to make it a permanent feature and charge this much, or didn't charge at least $18 a month, I would vote against it.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that update and acknowledgement of information. Conversation, discussion? Yes, Councilmember McGee.
When this program started, we were told that there would be a pilot program. We were then told that at the end of the pilot program, there would be a proposal that it would then turn into a semi-permanent program at approximately, and this is my memory, of about $200,000 to $300,000 a year that the city would subsidize that program. I've indicated all along I'm totally in favor of composting, but I think it's the kind of subject that we should be educating the citizens concerning and encouraging people to do composting. I think there are so many different ways to do this. We can have neighborhood sites, perhaps, where people can compost. There are some fantastic gardeners in Athens who would certainly accept compost from other people. So there are some options, and we could explore those, but my complaint with the current project is that they don't consider options. It's only one of these things, we'll pick it up and we'll charge you kind of program. I know shortly after the initial project was proposed, I was contacted by several companies that provide they look like very encouraging composting systems at the rate of $30 to $50 that people can buy to compost in their yards. So there are systems out there, there are possibilities out there, and I certainly wish that rather than continuing with the same system, that we would do something to encourage rural action or whoever's behind the project to actually use any money they have left or any money they would like to do to encourage this program to use it to educate the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McGee. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
Do I understand correctly that this would be an opt-in program so that citizens would be deciding personally if they wanted to spend $18 a month on that service?
You're asking me?
I'm asking anybody.
But there would have to be a ground level of people to even,
Well, yeah, at what point is the city subsidizing?
right.
What is the base number is what I'm asking.
If I may interject, I think the mayor was nodding if you wanted to share. Or...
I believe it should be an opt-in program as opposed to an opt-out program, for one. And number two, you know, it is a pilot. It was a pilot that was supposed to produce data. I think that council should ask to be presented with that data.
Agreed.
In order to be educated and move forward with the composting program. I will also say that what we were subsidizing, Councilmember McGee, actually went down because they expanded by another 35 individuals with the most recent expansion. So the concept being is that the more people who do opt into this program, those prices will drive down in terms of what someone would be paying in an opt-in system. It was never assumed or indicated that we would continue to subsidize at the $200,000 level moving forward, you know, to where the city is subsidizing something. You know, individuals in our community pay $3.50 for recycling, and then they pay X for their refuse. And so, you know, this would be similar to that, to where it could be another category to where you pay X, but again, it's based upon volume. Not volume of what you're composting, the volume of the number of people to opt into a program, a composting program. I agree with you, Councilmember McGee, in terms of educating the public to compost on their own. I personally compost, although I had the option, and I wasn't one of the 235 people to jump into the pilot program. I would almost prefer setting out a 5-gallon pail and having someone else take care of it as opposed to me having to worry about turning it and amending it and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's me with this particular program. I know that there have been surveys of those who are in the program, and overwhelmingly they've been positive in terms of what those who are in the program have been saying about the program. The negatives have been, I wish I had a rinsed out replacement 5-gallon bucket as opposed to the smell of the organic matter that sits in there. And I can relate to that because, again, I compost myself.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. And I would concur that it would be wise and fruitful to receive the data presentation. Councilmember Fall and then Councilmember Grace.
Well, I think that we do not have to make like a earth-shattering decision.
Correct.
Even though the model, I would like, after the time, June 30th is done, it would be good to have people come in with all the data that they now have and the final data crunching and see what our options are. And I think, you know, there might be a menu too of possible things that we can afford, and sort of things, so.
Yes, Mayor, and then Councilmember Grace. Sorry, thank you.
Might I suggest, and again, this is just simply that not to extend for an entire 6 more months of pilot, you know, that council could authorize an extension of a month or two, which would give rural action time to put together something. It's unfortunate that we're at this point in the month of June and you guys are going on recess for the month of July, to where there's not enough time between now and the time that this program's going to stop, you know, so that people's service is going to go away. But it would also give rural action time to put their presentation together. And if they can, what would be great is before you go on recess to give you something to, no pun intended, digest and look at that data and make a clear, informed decision as to what council wants to do with this pilot.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember?
Yes, I was just going to say we need more information before we as council can make a decision. And I think an important piece of information is who of the people who opted in, who wants to pay for it. You know, and I think that it could certainly be designed as, yes, the city authorizes the continuation of this project on the condition that some baseline number of people opt in and agree to pay their fees for it. And that, but we need the numbers. We need to know, okay, well, is it going to cost $18 per household with 200 households? Well, what if we get to 300 households? Or what if there are only 100? And I don't think we can possibly make a decision without knowing whether or not the currently participating households are willing to pay and at what limit. And I think that the Rural Action certainly has the contact information and the ability to provide us with that information.
What I can get, council, is the reduction in our subsidy for the extension of the pilot program, where they added 35 more people into that pilot program, because it did decrease. Our expenditure for that went down. So I can give you that, and so you can kind of formulate for yourselves. But again, I encourage council to make sure you're getting the data that you need from those running the pilot program.
Council members, Councilmember Katsas?
Yeah, just one quick comment. Nobody even needs to respond to this. Is just as I was thinking through this, we knew this date was coming up, and now we're asking maybe just a month extension or something like that. But we knew this date was coming, So if it's happening now and there's not enough time because we don't have the information in front of us to make the decision. I'll say again, we knew that this date was coming.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, thank you.
Sure, and that's why we vote. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
no.
okay to vote no.
Okay.
It's okay to vote yes. Any other questions or comments from, yes, Councilmember Reisner?
I just want to chime in on Councilmember Costas. I mean, this has been going on now for almost a year, and it's not like, oh, gee whiz, we didn't know this was coming up. And it's really up to Rural Action, though, to come to council to inform us rather than us to keep going to them and asking, what's the data? What should we do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the decision actually was already made when we voted to extend this, which was it ends June 30th, and that's it, drop dead date. And I feel we really should keep to that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, this thing just keeps going on perpetually. And,
What kind of timeline are we expecting from Rural Action to be able to turn around and give us something?
Tomorrow. I mean, they have the data. Why couldn't they give us the information now? I mean, the City Service Safety Director, Andy Stone, seemed to be very familiar with it. I wish I'd had more time to look at the data that he was basing his $18 figure on, but certainly it was based upon something. And knowing he doesn't just pick numbers out of the air. He's very precise, concise, and punctual. So I'm rambling here, but
No,
I don't know. I just think it's run its course, and it's okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think.
Just
Yes,
one more
Councilmember
thing.
Grace.
I think the pilot project could end, but that doesn't eliminate the possibility for implementing a new opt-in
No,
program if there is sufficient interest from people who do wish to pay for a
That's true.
composting program.
Well, in summer is hard to even get people to start talking about opting in and opting out. I mean, I think that I do share Councilman Katz's concern about a lot of things that are coming in really late when we're looking at them. I mean, this is pretty late. So that was some of the other it reduces the opportunity for us to be able to meet with people or read the latest things coming out. And I think that that's not necessarily good for council or the city.
Thank you, everyone. If there's no further comments from up here from council, I will open the floor briefly here for the floor. Thank you.
I'm Rob Delac, 124 Morris Avenue in the city. I've been in this program since the start. I was one of the original 10 or 20 people prior to this program that was getting the household pickup before. So haven't been here in Athens that long, but they're already looking and had a small group of people doing this prior to. this pilot. So I was one of those. So I agree with what Councilman McGee said, is that we should educate people on how they can do this themselves. We just had a conversation recently, you and I, about this, and I think I'm still not one of those people to do it myself. And like the mayor said as well, I think this is a program we need to have, because there's some people that will do this if there's a venue or a mechanism like this to have it picked up and taken care of, and willing to pay for that service, and was willing to pay before this pilot as well, even though we actually never got charged, by the way, oddly enough. But at any rate, AHRC, with a bid that was just rejected for trash pickup, trash recycling pickup, included, from what I read in the paper at least, $132,000 for a composting program over the numbers you heard. So you heard like 1.4 million, I think was their bid, or 1.3 something. They had 132,000 on top of that, they said, for a composting program. So that would have started July 1st. I think what their intent was, to sort of answer Council Member Reisner's comment, is they were intending this becomes a permanent program as part of the contract on July 1st. Well, that all got thrown out the door. So they were thinking ahead, and they included it in the bid. So maybe we shouldn't throw this out. We, I think, need to look at options, again, weigh options to figure out what makes sense. If this goes away, probably AHRC will try and do something to help meet this need, but it won't be on the scale, and therefore it might not be economically feasible. I'm not sure. If you do the math on the 132,000 and divide that by $18 a month, that's about 600 households, to give you a number. So if there are 600 households, that's 18 sounds a little high, maybe. 10 would be a better target, I think, for economics for a program like this. I think, I don't know how many households we have in the city that are served by trash pickup, but it's more than that. But I'm not sure how many more. But.
Thank you, Mr. Dulac. Thank you. Anything else? Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I think I'd like to encourage you to look at the options, get the data, like you've talked about, and not throw this out without really considering what the options are, and if there's, I'm not necessarily saying keep the pilot going, but at least do it smart here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your input on this. I think the prudent thing for me to do as well, as President Pro Tem, is to make sure that I'm communicating with President Nisley. I think her input and conversation on this is valuable as well, since she wasn't here this evening. And I'd like to follow up with her to see the direction she would like us to lead collectively, if that makes sense. Thank you, Mayor. I didn't see your hand.
You know, to Mr. Dulac's point, I mean, I just ran some real quick numbers just now, and, you know, if there was 1,700 homes that were in this program, it's a stretch, and I get it, but if there were, with that, what was in the bid, you know, that translates to roughly $6.37 a month for someone in the city of Athens. But that, again, that's assuming that everybody would opt in, which isn't.
Thank you. If there's no further, Mr.
No,
Reisner?
it's the only my only concern. I just want to say this one more time, that I like the idea of composting and so on, but it has to pay for itself. Somewhere, whatever that number is, $10, $18, $1.32 per person. I don't know what that number is to be exact, but unless it does, we can't do it. We simply don't have the money. I can't emphasize that enough, okay? We just don't. It ain't out there now, folks. So you can't promise everything if you can't afford it. So whatever we come up with, we have to make sure it pays for itself.
Thank you.
The end.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments and participation in government at the local level this evening. It is on or around 8:55 p.m. This concludes our committees for the evening, and we hope to see you all next week for our regular session. Thank you.